Nora Fenn had been running Caldwell Transit Solutions for 11 years, and in that time she had learned to read a room the way other people read weather, by the small signs, the pressure shifts, the way a silence could mean nothing or everything depending on who was in it. She was 44 years old. She had built the company from a regional bus maintenance contractor into one of the largest fleet management firms in Ontario, with contracts that stretched from Thunder Bay to the Quebec border. Her office was on the 14th floor of a glass building on Bay Street, and on clear mornings she could see the lake from her desk, flat and gray and enormous, which she had always found steadying. The lake did not care about quarterly projections. She found that useful. The week her regular driver had his appendix out was the same week she had 3 site visits, a federal audit, and a deposition that had been rescheduled twice already. Her assistant, a careful young man named Theo, had handled the logistics without being asked. He had sent her a single message: replacement arranged. Name is Grant Selby, mechanic by trade, licensed commercial driver, cleared background, starts Monday. She had not asked further questions. She had 17 other things to think about. Grant Selby was 41 years old. He drove a truck that needed a new alternator and kept putting it off because the alternator cost $312, and his daughter's winter boots had cost $270, and the furnace filter was overdue. And the list did not end, it only shifted priority. He lived in a duplex in Etobicoke with his daughter Ruby, who was 7, and who had recently developed a strong opinion about which color of thermos her lunch went in. He had been a certified heavy equipment mechanic for 16 years. He had worked in mining camps in northern Ontario and on rail yards, and on one memorable contract, rebuilding the hydraulic systems on a ferry that ran between Tobermory and South Baymouth. He was good at his work in the way that some people are good at it, not because it came easily, but because he had taken it seriously enough to understand it at a level past the manual. His wife, Constance, had died 3 years ago. Ovarian cancer, caught late, gone quickly. He did not talk about this. There was nothing to say about it that the fact itself did not already contain. The driving work was temporary. A friend of a friend had passed his name to a staffing agency. He had the license, the clean record, the open schedule. Ruby's school started at 8:15 and ended at 3:30, and the math worked out. He needed the money. He took the job. He showed up Monday morning at 7:50 with a clean shirt and the knowledge that the black SUV idling at the building's rear entrance had brake pads that were probably 6 weeks from needing replacement. He knew this because he had walked around it once while waiting and had looked at the wheels the way he always looked at wheels, the way other people cannot stop looking at a loose thread. Nora came downstairs at 8:03. She was on a call. She got into the back seat without looking at him directly, said Queensway and Kipling, the maintenance yard, not the office front, and continued talking into her phone about liability thresholds and subcontractor agreements. Grant pulled out of the lot. He did not speak. He knew the address. He had looked up the site the night before because he liked to know where he was going before he went there. The drive took 22 minutes. She finished one call and started another. He took the route that avoided the construction on Dundas, which she noticed, because her previous driver had never once avoided the construction on Dundas. She didn't say anything, but she noticed. At the yard, she was out of the car before he had it fully stopped, walking toward a cluster of men in high-visibility vests. He parked and waited. He had brought a book. He read 40 pages. He also, without particular intention, watched the yard. He watched because it was the kind of yard he understood. He could see from where he was sitting that the second bay had a lift that wasn't level. The hydraulic cylinder on the left side was compensating, the vehicle sitting at a slight angle that would be invisible to anyone who wasn't looking for it. He could see that the fuel depot gate was padlocked with a lock that had a shackle too short for the hasp, which meant it could be popped with a flathead screwdriver in under 30 seconds. Neither of these things was his business. He noted them the way he noted everything mechanical, not with alarm, but with the quiet cataloging of a person who thinks in systems. Nora came back at 11:40. She looked tired. "Lunch," she said. "King and Bathurst, the Japanese place." He drove. "Halfway there," she said, without looking up from her phone. "You took the Queensway back instead of Lake Shore. There's a delivery truck that parks half on the bike lane at the King Street merge on weekday mornings," he said. "It backs up. Usually clears by noon, but I didn't want to chance it." She looked up then. "Not for long." "Okay," she said. That was all. By Wednesday, she had stopped conducting calls in the car. This was not a decision she made consciously. It happened because on Tuesday afternoon, he had been waiting outside the Federal Building on Front Street while she was inside, and when she came out, she had been shaken in a way she didn't want to perform for an audience, even a silent one. The deposition had not gone well. One of their former subcontractors had alleged that Caldwell had knowingly used non-compliant brake systems on 3 vehicles in the Sudbury contract. It was not true, but the documentation that would have made it obviously not true had a gap in it, and gaps were what lawyers lived on. She sat in the back seat and looked out the window and said nothing for a long time. Grant drove north on University, and then west without asking for a destination, moving through traffic at a speed that felt, for no reason she could articulate, deliberate, like someone who had decided where he was going without needing to announce it. "The office?" he said finally. "Yes," she said. Then, "No, give me 10 minutes." He pulled into a parking lot near Trinity Bellwoods, cut the engine. She looked at the park, the November trees stripped down to their structure, the dog walkers and the joggers and the ordinary afternoon that had nothing to do with liability thresholds. "My father built this company," she said. She didn't know why she said it. She wasn't speaking to him particularly. He was a mechanic, fleet mechanic. He kept school buses running in Renfrew County for 30 years. When he retired, he had 16 buses under his personal maintenance record. Not one accident attributed to mechanical failure, not one. Grant said nothing. "People think I inherited something," she said. "I didn't. He left me a client list and a reputation and told me the rest was my problem." She paused. "The rest was my problem. That's not the worst thing someone can leave you," Grant said. She looked at him in the rearview mirror. He was watching the park. "No," she said. "I suppose it isn't." She had him drive to the office. She did not say anything else. But the 10 minutes had done something, and she went upstairs with a steadier walk than she'd come down with. Thursday was the day she found out about the invoices. It was Theo who brought it to her, his face arranged in the careful blankness of someone delivering information they would prefer not to be delivering. The audit had flagged something. 2 invoices from a parts supplier, Belmont Industrial, out of Mississauga, that did not match the corresponding purchase orders. The discrepancy was not large in absolute terms. But the pattern, once you looked for it, was there. Someone had been substituting lower-grade components and billing Caldwell for the certified equivalents. The difference went somewhere. It had been going somewhere for approximately 14 months. The Sudbury vehicles, the brake systems. She sat at her desk for a long time after Theo left. The allegation in the deposition had not been accidental. Someone had known what to allege because someone had made it true, and that someone had access to the procurement system, which meant they were inside the company, had been inside it for over a year, had let her walk into a federal deposition with a gap in her documentation, and had known, in advance, exactly how large the gap was. She pulled the supplier file, Belmont Industrial. She went back through the approval chain on the invoices. The name that appeared on the secondary sign-off, 3 levels below her, was Reginald Forsyth. Reginald Forsyth was her VP of Operations. He had been with Caldwell for 9 years. He had attended her father's retirement dinner. He had a photograph of himself and her father on a fishing trip in Muskoka on his office credenza. She closed the file. She opened it again. The numbers did not change. She called down to Theo and told him she needed the car in 20 minutes. She did not tell him where she was going because she did not yet know. Grant had the car at the back entrance at the time she'd asked. She came out looking the way people look when they are working very hard to look normal. He did not pull out. He waited. "I don't have a destination," she said. "That's fine," he said. He drove west along the lakeshore. The sky was the specific gray of late November in Toronto, the kind that feels less like weather and more like a ceiling being lowered. The water was dark and flat, and the beach at Humber Bay was empty. "How long have you been a mechanic?" she asked. 16 years, he said. Started on heavy equipment. Mining, mostly, up north. Did some marine work. Last few years, mostly automotive off. You don't seem like someone who ended up doing it by accident. "I'm not," he said. "My father worked in a foundry. He knew how things were made. He used to say that if you understand how something is put together, you understand how it can come apart. That seemed important to me." He paused. "Still does." She looked at the water. "My father said something similar. He called it knowing where the weakness is before the weakness knows you're looking." Grant glanced at her in the mirror. "That's a better way of putting it." "He was a better mechanic than I'll ever be at anything," she said. "He could look at a vehicle and tell you what was wrong with it before he touched it. Not magic. Just, he'd seen enough things fail that he recognized failure coming." "That's what it is," Grant said. "Pattern recognition. People think it's intuition. It isn't. It's just accumulated data that runs faster than conscious thought." She turned to look at the back of his head. He was watching the road. "What made you take the driving work?" she asked. "My daughter," he said simply. "The hours work around school, and I needed the income while I'm between contracts." He said it without apology or decoration. It was the tone of someone who had made a practical decision and did not require it to be understood as anything else. "How old is she?" 7. "Her name is Ruby." He said it differently than he'd said everything else. Not softer exactly, more careful, like something he handled with both hands. Nora looked back at the lake. "My father used to bring me to Muskoka every August. Just the two of us. He'd spend half the time lying under someone's boat engine, and I'd sit on the dock reading. I thought I was bored. I realize now I wasn't bored at all." Grant was quiet for a moment. Then, "My daughter thinks she wants to be a veterinarian. Last month she wanted to be a welder. I haven't discouraged either." Nora almost smiled. It was close enough to count. "Drive me back," she said. "I have some calls to make." What she was doing, she told herself, was due diligence. She was not accusing anyone. She was following the documentation to wherever it led. This was the professional version of what her father had called knowing where the weakness is. You looked at the system, not the person. The person was just where the system had failed. But Reginald Forsyth's name was on the sign-off, and when she called the supplier directly, speaking to a logistics coordinator who did not know who she was and therefore did not arrange his words carefully, she learned that Belmont Industrial's primary contact at Caldwell had always been a man who called himself Reg. The coordinator described a man who knew the procurement system in detail and who had, about 16 months ago, asked whether Belmont could fulfill orders for 2 separate product grades while billing only for the core. The coordinator had assumed it was some kind of internal audit protocol. He'd been told it was a quality testing program. She hung up and sat for a moment. The allegation in the deposition had come from a former subcontractor named Morris Webb, a man who had lost a Caldwell contract 18 months ago when Nora had refused to renew it after discovering safety concerns in his crew's maintenance logs. He had been angry. She had understood the anger and not reversed the decision. But Morris Webb would not have known about the brake system specifics unless someone had told him. Someone who wanted the deposition to go badly. Someone who had a reason to want Caldwell's reputation destabilized. 9 years, a fishing photograph, a retirement dinner. She thought about her father's 16 buses, not one accident attributed to mechanical failure. He had kept that record because he had taken the work seriously, because he had believed the work mattered, because 30 years of children had climbed into those buses, and he had understood his role in getting them home. Reginald Forsyth had spent 9 years inside a company built on that belief and had decided it was useful cover. She had not planned to tell Grant any of this. She was not someone who told drivers things. She was not particularly someone who told anyone things. But Friday morning he picked her up at 7:40 and she got in and he pulled out, and after 4 blocks she said, "I need to stop somewhere before the office. It's not on any list." "Tell me where," he said. "I need to see the Sudbury yard," she said. "The vehicles in question. I need to look at them myself." He did not ask what vehicles or what question. He said, "That's a 4-hour drive, I know." He was quiet for 3 seconds. "I'll need to make a call, Ruby's school pickup." "Of course," she said. "Take the time you need." He pulled over on Richmond Street and made a call. She heard him talking to someone. A neighbor, she gathered, a woman who apparently had done this before, and who asked about the purple thermos, which seemed to be important. He said yes, the purple one, it's on the hook by the door. He hung up. "Ready," he said. She told him the yard address. He put it in and pulled back into traffic. They drove north on the 400 in the kind of companionable quiet that takes time to build, the kind she had not had with another person in longer than she wanted to calculate. She worked on her laptop for the first hour. He drove and did not fill the silence with radio or small talk, which she found, unexpectedly, a relief. North of Barrie, the land opened up. The trees closed in from both sides of the highway, dark spruce and bare poplar, the granite shoulders of the Canadian Shield, pushing up through the soil in long gray ridges. She put her laptop away and watched it. "My father drove this road a lot," she said. "He had clients all the way up to Timmins, mining country," Grant said. "He used to say the Shield was honest," she said. "Didn't try to be anything it wasn't. Just sat there being old. I worked a job up near Sudbury," Grant said. "Open pit nickel mine. Summer. The machinery was enormous, not just big, enormous. Things you couldn't see all of at once. I spent 3 months there and I kept thinking about the people who'd designed it, all those interlocking systems. One thing fails and you don't just have a broken part, you have a cascade. Is that what you were thinking about?" she said. "Or is that what you're thinking about now?" He glanced in the mirror. "Now," he admitted. She nodded. She had been thinking about cascades too. The Sudbury yard manager was a compact woman named Roshani, who had worked for Caldwell for 6 years, and who received Nora with the particular expression of someone who is very relieved to see the person they have been very afraid to call. "I didn't know who to go to," Roshani said, as she unlocked the secondary maintenance bay. "When the auditors were here, I told them what I told you. But I didn't know if it would. I didn't know if anyone was listening. I'm listening now," Nora said. The vehicles were there, 3 coaches in a row, pulled from service for the audit. Nora walked around them. She was not a mechanic. She knew enough to know what she was seeing, and not enough to know what she wasn't. She looked at Grant. He had followed her in without being asked, and he was looking at the undercarriage of the nearest vehicle, with the focused quality of a person who has stopped thinking about anything except what's in front of them. "May I?" he said to Roshani. Roshani looked at Nora. "He's a certified heavy equipment mechanic," Nora said. 16 years. Roshani handed him a light. He was under the first vehicle for 4 minutes. He came out and moved to the second. Then the third. He stood up and handed the light back. "The brake lines are correct grade on all 3. He said. "They're not what was billed. I'd want to pull the stamps to be sure, but I can tell you these are not the premium certified components. They're functional. They're not at manufacturer spec for this vehicle class." He looked at Nora. "They're not going to cause an accident tomorrow. But if this was a systematic substitution over 14 months across your whole fleet, you need to go through every vehicle. Not because they'll all fail, because you need to know which ones might." He was not alarmed. He was precise. He said the thing that needed to be said in the order that it needed to be said, and he stopped when he had said it. Roshani was looking at him. "Who are you?" she said. "Grant Selby," he said. "He's been driving for me this week," Nora said. Roshani looked at Nora. Nora looked at the vehicles. I need you to document everything you just said, Nora told him. In writing, for the audit file. She paused. If you're willing, yes, he said. Without hesitation, without calculation, she thought about what her father used to say. You want to know who a person is, put something real in front of them, and watch how they pick it up. On the drive back, it was dark by the time they hit Barry. The highway was quiet, and the stars were out in the way they only are when you're far enough from the city to let them. You didn't have to come in, she said. At the yard. That wasn't part of what you were hired to do. No, he said. Why did you? He thought about it. She could see him thinking, the slight adjustment in his posture that meant he wasn't going to say the first thing that came to him. My wife's family lost a lot in a workplace accident, he said. A long time ago, before I knew them. Equipment failure. Something that should have been caught, he paused. I don't drive past things that need looking at. She sat with that for a moment. I'm sorry, she said. About your wife, thank you, he said. The way he said it meant he had heard that sentence many times and had found a way to receive it without it wrecking him, which was its own kind of skill. The highway stretched out ahead of them, the headlights catching the line of trees on either side, the white dashes on the asphalt, the ordinary persistence of a road that was taking them somewhere. Ruby will be asleep by the time you get back, Nora said. She usually waits up, he said. She's not supposed to. She does it anyway. My father used to do that, she said. When I was young, if he had a late job, he'd always be up when I came home from wherever I'd been. He'd have tea on. He'd pretend he just happened to be awake. Ruby pretends she fell asleep on the couch, Grant said, and woke up just now. Coincidentally. Nora laughed. It was a small laugh, the kind you don't plan, the kind that comes out because something actually reached you. The formal complaint against Reginald Forsyth went to the board on the following Tuesday. Nora filed it herself, with documentation that took 2 of her lawyers 4 days to compile. And that was thorough in the way that things are thorough when someone has been very angry and has channeled it entirely into precision. The invoice discrepancies, the communications with Morris Webb, found eventually in a personal email account that Reginald Forsyth had used on the company network with a confidence that, in retrospect, said something about how safe he had felt. The brake component substitutions across the fleet, which turned out to affect 41 vehicles and not 3, and which Caldwell addressed through a systematic inspection program that Nora announced publicly and ahead of any requirement to do so. The board was not pleased. Boards rarely were when the news came from inside. She stood at the head of the table and presented the findings and the remediation plan, and she did not apologize for the situation, because it was not hers to apologize for. She took responsibility for addressing it, and she described, in clear language, what addressing it was going to cost, and what it would look like, and what she expected from the people sitting at the table. She was the youngest person in the room by 12 years. She had been the youngest person in most of the rooms she'd stood in her entire career. She had stopped finding it relevant. Reginald Forsyth submitted his resignation 2 hours before the meeting. She had expected that. Morris Webb's lawyers called to discuss the deposition. She had expected that too. What she had not expected, on the morning after the board meeting, was that she would stand at her office window, looking at the lake, and find herself thinking about a 7-year-old who pretended to fall asleep on the couch. She called Theo into her office and asked him to extend Grant's contract through the end of the month. Then she thought about it and asked him to find out what Grant's rate was for consulting work. Mechanical systems assessment, specifically. Fleet inspection. Theo made a note and left. She turned back to the window. The lake was the way it always was. Flat, gray, enormous. The kind of thing that had been there long before her problems started and would be there long after they were resolved. Her phone rang. An interview request from a trade publication that had heard about the fleet inspection announcement. She took the call. She was on her way down to the car 20 minutes later when she got a text from an unknown number. Ruby wanted me to tell you she's going to be a marine biologist now. Apparently, vets and welders are no longer relevant. Gee, she stopped on the stairs and read it twice. She typed back, "Tell her the lake is right here if she wants a head start." She was smiling when she got to the bottom of the stairs. She did not arrange her face before she came through the door. Grant was standing by the car, which was running. He saw the expression, and he didn't say anything about it, which was the right call. He just opened the door. She got in the front seat. It was different from the back seat, and he registered that without comment, and pulled out into the morning. And the city was the way it always is in the first part of the day. Not yet what it will become, still carrying a little of the night before, moving through its own familiar streets toward whatever comes next.